Welcome to the Startup Help Desk. We are your source for answers to questions about starting companies, building businesses, and the meaning of life. We have a panel here of successful founders, investors, and entrepreneurs who are going to share our experience in founding companies to make your journey as a founder hopefully a little bit easier. We are coming here at a very important event. This is episode 50. We have had 50 episodes of the Startup Help Desk. We'd answered questions from founders for 50 episodes. That's a lot of questions and a lot of answers.
We've grown old together.
I know. We've come so far and we've grown as founders. And so today we have a special treat for episode 50. We're really going to pull back the curtain so you learn more about Nick, Ash, and myself and our journeys, because every week we're answering questions, but let's pull back the curtain about mistakes we've made, our stories.
I did not agree to that analogy that you're using on the pullback curtain thing, just in case any family members are listening.
So let's introduce our panel. As always, my name is Sean Burns. I was a founder for about 20 years of companies like Flurry and Outlier. 2 years ago, I started a new venture fund called Near Horizon. So I'm on the other side of the equation, but still getting involved in helping build businesses from 0 to 1. Along the way, I've invested in, hundreds of companies as an angel and a few dozen venture funds as an LP. But happy to share all those stories today. I'm also joined, as always, by Ash and Nick.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ash Rust. I'm a pre-seed investor based in San Francisco. I mostly invest in companies based in the US and Europe at the idea stage through my fund, Sterling Road. I've also worked at places like Trinity Ventures as an entrepreneur in residence and Bullpen Capital as an advisor. Before investing, I was an entrepreneur myself, most notably an early employee at the social media company Clout, as well as the co-founder and CEO of SendUp. These days, I spend most of my time coaching founders, and I've helped more than 1,500 startups over the years.
Hey, this is Nick Melionis. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Navi. Our tools and services help people and organizations start and succeed on their innovation quests. I've supported hundreds of innovators and startups, and I'm hyped to hop into today's episode.
And normally, our episodes are full of questions from the audience. That won't be true today, but if you have questions, we would love to answer your questions in a future episode. Head over to thestartuphelpdesk.com or thestartuphd on Twitter/X and let us know what your questions are. We'll cover them in future episodes. Today, in celebration of episode 50, we are going to pull back the curtain and you're going to hear a lot more about all of our careers, the ups and downs of our founding journey, all of the hard experience that we learned that helps us answer these questions, the highlights, all that kind of good stuff. And of course, the best question to start off this episode for, and the best stories to start off, are the bad ones. And that's what we're going to do. So Ash and Nick, let's get started with, what was the worst crisis you faced as a founder and how did you overcome it? Ash, what do you think? Get us started.
Yeah, so back when I was a CEO at SendHub, we had a strategic investor who was very excited, they told us, about buying our company. What happened, though, was they ended up acquiring our competitor. And they gave us about 2 hours notice on that before they announced it to the press. So that was rough. And then we were getting pretty close to running out of money. So we were going to need to sell in the next sort of 6 to 9 months or so. And now I was starting from scratch. Well, worse than actual zero. I had a negative situation because I had to explain why we had a strategic investor that didn't want to buy us anymore. So we had to do 50 first meetings, and fundraising is a lot easier than getting sold as a company because, people aren't necessarily looking to buy a company per se. So we went through months and months of work, 90 days at least of first meetings or so to get to those 50, found an acquirer, and that was incredible that we got to sign for the deal and start the diligence process, which is very, very long when you do an acquisition. And oftentimes during M&A, the acquirer and the company being acquired will be aware of this sort of dwindling balance in the company that's being bought. And so they will often have to loan money to the company they're buying in order for them to do things like make payroll, keep the office open, all that kind of stuff. Now, we were cutting costs, etc., so we'd cut the costs down as much as we could. And the company that was buying us had agreed to make a loan to us, but it didn't come in time. And that was unexpected.
Man.
Yes. So we had a payroll to run based on a loan that we were assured was coming at least a few days previous, but did not. And I remember being stood on a set of wooden stairs in our makeshift office, getting a call from our COO, and just sitting down on those stairs and realizing that he and I were about to sign for 6 figures in personal loans in order to make this payroll go through. And obviously we were only getting that back if the company got acquired, if that deal closed. I was about 2 months in to getting engaged at that point. So it was a really fun conversation when I got home that evening.
Wow.
So that's my story.
Dude, that is bad. And but it did all work out, right? In the end,
it did work out. We sold the company. And,
nice.
We did not. We were not liable for that, for those monies. Thank God.
That is harsh, man. I didn't even know that full story. That is intense, man. How does that conversation go with your fiance? I'm not even.
Yeah, you know what? Just wanted to say, funny story. We're in debt. Quite a lot, actually. And if it goes left from here, there's no recourse.
Oh, man.
And I hope you still love me.
Oh, that is
something
harsh,
else.
Man.
Yes.
So Ash,
that's my advice, folks. Make sure you pick the right partner.
That is golden. That's so money.
Give us another story, Nick. We need to hear. You're going to hear a lot of groans in this segment, folks, because we're reliving some really rough memories. Nick, what was your worst crisis?
Yeah, I think the magic of the startup journey is that there are no shortages of crises by any means. But I think my worst one, I think I would say it's my first. And perhaps it's always just the classic first is worst type of situation. This was with my Bitcoin startup. We were launching with an iconic customer. We were media darlings. As a result, we had incredible inbound interest for our product. We had investors that were reaching out and were saying, hey, what can we do to get you more capital so y'all can keep doing what you're doing? We didn't raise any additional capital at that time, though, because we were just so laser focused on delivering value to this customer and then our subsequent customers. Ultimately, when we launched, it was exceptionally fun and rewarding, but the data just didn't justify that things were working. Didn't justify it for the customer, nor did we have evidence and enough validation that we were on the right track. Soon thereafter, that customer churned. We ultimately lost conviction in terms of what our product should do and how we could actually bring value to this opportunity. We were pivoting aimlessly. We had a key teammate leave. Ultimately, we had gone from this moment of euphoria to now being really back at square one without actually having a principled way for us to build this business. We had always said, we're going to launch, we're going to make the magic happen, and it's only up from here. It was really tough. And we were in the midst of an accelerator at the time. I love accelerators. I love demo day. Demo day was miserable. I could not deliver a message that was compelling in any way. So we didn't fundraise more following that. And in fact, we ended up having...
You wasted the demo day? You couldn't raise?
Completely wasted demo day. And that was just kind of the start. It took, I think time is the ultimate currency and speed for your startup. It took us months and months and quarters of time. I mean, probably 6+ months for us to even just figure out how do we take a principled approach to build this business. It was unreal. And so I think I'm
just impressed you stayed motivated this whole time. That sounds like an enormously demotivating experience.
Yeah, it was brutal. You know, we'd raised some capital before the moment, so we had some fuel to keep us still thinking about the business, but we just didn't have principles in terms of how to build a company.
That is harsh, man.
Yeah, it was tragic. Also,
that's rough.
I'll say this. I think this is why I'm so passionate about the learning opportunities that come from the Startup Help Desk. These kind of things are avoidable if you can have principled strategies for building a company. I didn't have that, and it was so painful and took so much time. And it was a miracle to be able to emerge from the other side of that and still be positive about building companies. I'll tell you that much.
Oof, I believe it, man.
can imagine,
That's harsh. Well, now that all three of us have shared our worst crisis, let's move on to the next topic here.
Nice try.
Sean, if you want to skip, it's okay. No one's going to be upset. It's just what's comfortable for you. This is
let's
San
go
Francisco.
down the most horrible memory lane in history. There's been, all of my companies have had moments of insolvency, which are horrible. But the one I'll share with you here is there was a point. This is my first company at Flurry. We had gotten to this point where the company had done fairly well as a mobile app developer, and we'd raised money, but it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't that we're going fast enough to raise more money. It wasn't going well enough to make enough money. And so we had to face this really important key moment about what to do. And we decided to pivot, but there's a lot of risk in pivoting, as you know. And so we had gotten to the process of pivoting, but there was a lot of risk in the company. And we'd worked on it at that point for a few years. So there's a lot of, investment of emotions. There was one Friday where my co-founder, who I'd worked with at that point for 3 years or so, he walked out of the office, and like 5 minutes after he left, we got his resignation email effective immediately. He just walked out of the office without saying anything, no hint that it was going to happen, just walked out, ghosted us, no warning. I was obviously upset. This is somebody I'd worked with for years, and they just totally just walked out, no warning. And then of course the next morning, my marriage at the time wasn't going so well. My wife decided to leave, and so my wife left me like 12 hours later. And
God!
No.
And yep, you win. I'm glad we saved that one to the end. Jeez.
I was sitting there Saturday afternoon. I was like, my company that I worked on is obviously falling apart. Like my personal life is falling apart. Like what's left? What is there to grab onto, and what is there to do? It was harsh because I think it's we often try to pretend like you can separate personal and work life. It's just not true. It's just everything ends up intertwining together. And while Flurry we survived that. The pivot actually worked better than anybody could have imagined. But that moment, never forget that Saturday afternoon was like, what have I been doing with my life? Like everything I've been working on is falling apart. It was tough. It was one of those moments where you start to wonder, like, am I good at anything? Like, at all.
Yeah, I mean, you should have just gone to work at Google, bro. That was jeez.
Oh God, it was a dark moment, man. But and I almost feel bad about telling that story
still
because
here. Thank God.
It all worked out in the end, which I feel bad because I mean, as you guys know, it often doesn't work out. Like for all our stories, like the company doesn't get acquired, or like there is no pivot that saves the business. Like it's actually sad that often
we have survivorship bias in a major way. For sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So many of the people that we fund at the idea stage, they can be very determined, and then they can stick with the idea for too long, and that can do a lot of damage. And, it's like, am I good at anything? What have I done with my time? Feeling is very prominent.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we got to turn it around. We got to up the ante. There's enough depressing stuff. Let's talk about some positives. So I will, since I brought us down, I will bring us back up.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's talk about the highlights of our founder career. What was the top of the mountain for everybody? And
I can skip this one.
I will. So I will say it would be easy to tell you it was like the closing dinner for the Flurry acquisition, which was a huge acquisition. It was a great celebration. And let me tell you, that was a pretty awesome moment, especially after the wire transfers are done, all the money's in your account. Oddly enough, that was not the highlight for me. The highlight for me was there's a select few conversations that I've had, actually more than a whole bunch of people who work for me. And this was after the company had either gotten acquired or whatever. And they sat down and they're like, that was the best job I've ever had. And working for you was the best experience in my professional career. Like that has meant more to me than everything else put together.
Epic.
You can have that kind of impact on someone's life just by doing what I thought was right. And that's what has always kept me going, is those conversations. And luckily there was more than a few, and it's been fuel for me through all those dark days.
And it was just great that you were working with people who are coming out of jobs in jail and that kind of stuff.
That's right. People had no idea what a good job looked like.
I mean, as long as you're helping somebody.
This job was so much better than making license plates. It was
Nick, let's move on.
Oh, goodness. All right, let's do this thing. At Navi, When it comes to building our business, we've had this chance to work with the US military to support their efforts to build cultures of innovation. It's hard for me to put into words what an honor that is. It has been exceptional supporting the US military's innovation efforts. And I want to frame that because ultimately, in order to earn that opportunity, there's a lot of incremental steps that it takes to get there. And the one that I reflect on as being a true highlight on this journey is for Navi, our first user was a first-time startup founder. She wanted to build a business. And we had this vision for Navi as being this engine that could help people figure out how do you ultimately unearth problems that matter and bring your ideas to life. And we had this ambitious product vision, which we continue to advance on today. But V1 of it was we started an email thread with this founder. And all we did was we would send an email every few days with a couple bullet point pieces of information, guidance, and curriculum, and just a prompt for her to take some next step and do something to bring her idea to life. She followed that guidance in unbelievable ways, built a business that ultimately brought incredible value to her. And the major reflection point and moment of pride for me was I had caught up with her, well after we were done supporting her by way of this V1 email test. And she said that she is at inbox 1 in her email. She eliminates every email, everything from her inbox, and she keeps one email in it, and it's the email thread from us interacting and supporting her.
Oh, wow.
That is just so fun. And so I think it's all about...
Nice. Congrats, man.
Yeah, it
is
feels
it because
amazing.
she can't figure out how to delete it? Is that what it is?
That's our product. Yeah.
It's the email that just keeps coming back. It's
exactly.
It's snooze, but it's 8 a.m. every day.
That is exactly it. But yeah,
All
so
right,
it's
good
all
stories,
about...
guys. Let's move on to the next set.
No, Ash, we need this.
So for me, I'll be honest, I was a B plus founder. And as much as I would love to say the moment of celebration came when we sold the company or when we hit some kind of revenue milestone, those were all more moments of relief, honestly, because I was so worried that we were never going to get there. I think the moment where I felt like we were on top of the world, even for just a moment, was just after Y Combinator Demo Day. So this is 800 years ago, back in 2012, and we'd done a ton of practice on the pitch, and the team really came together to delegate out all the responsibilities of like materials, keeping things going back at the office, doing all the meeting setup, all that kind of stuff. And, I got on stage, gave the pitch, and it went exactly as we'd wanted it to. It was word perfect. And on the online system for where you get all the likes from the investors and the meeting requests, we got 8, which is just about the worst you will ever hear of. And we knew we were screwed. Like, me and my other co-founders were looking like, this is over for us. But in that moment, it would have been easy to get into a big fight. And instead we were like, no, we're going to do this together. And we hustled super hard for that whole day across the floor of Demo Day, and got 100 meetings from the business cards that we collected, raised 2 million within a couple of weeks. And
Nice.
It was so successful that YC actually asked me to come back and speak to the next batch. So It was just such a huge moment of pride that we hadn't had the easy setup. Demo Day hadn't gone the way it had for many other people, but we still managed to do really well on the fundraising. And that example was something that the people, we respected, wanted us to share. So that is definitely a moment in the career for me, for sure. But I'm a much better investor than I was a founder. That's for sure.
That's a fantastic outcome.
A great story of pulling success from the jaws of defeat. That is amazing. But in the moment, it must have been, how did you just deal with the stress? Because there was so much online.
That's the sort of advantage of having a large number of co-founders. We had 4. And so there's always one person in that kind of situation who's going to be like, well, we've got to do something, right? And that's the person who's likely to speak up first whilst everyone else is sulking. And so that just created the momentum. By the time I'd come off stage and was like worried about the number of likes we'd received, my other co-founders had already started collecting business cards. They hadn't even seen the numbers. By the time they came back to chat about it, we'd already had more than the 8 likes online. So just that momentum of having the group really, really helped, because we were able to support each other and do actions that actually helped as well.
That's awesome. Well, if you take any lesson away from this, folks, the highs can be enormously high and the lows can be really, really low. And unfortunately, they're all part of the same journey. You go up, you go down, and it gives you perspective, but it isn't easy. It isn't. Well, let's make it fun. Okay. We talked about highs, talked about lows. Let's go to like crazy and funny stuff, the most insanely bonkers stuff that's happened as founders. Ash, I think you have probably the best story out of us about bonkers stuff that's happened to you.
Yes. So we had a full-on charlatan at our company, i.e. someone that had lied about their resume, top to bottom. They lied to almost everyone that they spoke to. They lied about money. And we didn't know any of this. This person was sort of around tech for a while. I knew them through that. They were a very good marketer for us on our team. And we should put this in the notes for the podcast so people can click on the link. But one morning I got an email from one of my teammates, not this person, saying, "Hey, so-and-so, this lady's name, is in TechCrunch this morning. They're calling her the talented Mrs. Ripley." So this was a pretty big situation, to say the least. Like there was an accusation that they'd lied about working at Founders Fund and that had cost Founders Fund a deal, and there was a lawsuit about it. There was stealing rent money, stealing property. By the time I'd made it into the office, our COO was already in the main conference room going through our finances, and he'd found almost $5,000 worth of stuff stolen from just the credit card access that this person had. It was across the board. And we were in an office that was 2 rooms. There was a conference room and then the rest of the office. So this person knew what was going on. They'd also published a bunch of photos of themselves on Instagram with people like Justin Timberlake. And these were photoshopped images. So our designer came in after about an hour and he's like, I took these images apart piece by piece. They're all fake. She's lying to us.
Oh my god.
This person had cupcakes sent to the office from Justin Timberlake. The card said from Justin, like yada, yada, yada. It was wild.
No way.
Yeah. And so when we confronted them, they said it was all lies. And then more news came out later in the day. And we started to check up on some of the stories that we'd spoken to them about, when we hired them, and those weren't true. And then eventually she conceded everything. The whole thing was a lie, but asked to keep her job because that was all she had left.
Oh and my
so,
God.
Yeah, it was a nice little bit of guilt sprinkled on at the end to let that person go. As you can imagine, we fired them that day.
That's insane. So literally everything about them was a lie.
The whole thing. Like they'd managed to talk their way into tons of events and they knew tons of journalists. So they were doing great work for us but it was all just AstroTurf.
I almost feel like that person is so good at a very strange set of skills. There has to be a job they're perfect for. Like,
yes, they went back to film school after this and changed their name.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that is insanity. That's bonkers. Oh, man.
And you can imagine my co-founders are like, so, how'd you find this person, Ash?
Wow.
Yeah.
Man. Okay. Let's see. I don't know if I can top that story because that is bonkers. I've told my Steve Jobs story before in the podcast, so I won't bore you all with that one again.
I always want to hear it a second or 33rd time. Just
couldn't agree more.
I will. I'll give you a 30-second other story. So my Steve Jobs story. Flurry was the largest analytics company for mobile apps on iPhone, Android, and as a result, we saw all sorts of great information. The devices, how many people were using the latest iPhone, the new iPhone, these sorts of things. Back in the days before the iPad, there were always rumors the iPad was going to come out. There were rumors that Apple was developing an iPad, but nobody had any evidence because Apple, just like today, is super secretive. But on our network, we started to see this new device called the iProd pop up. And it was only being used in Cupertino, which is where the headquarters of Apple was. And we saw it just because we had all these apps using it, and they were testing some device in Cupertino that was called the iProd. It could have been a new iPhone, but we hypothesized maybe this was the iPad, the legendary iPad. And so we actually published a blog post, which in retrospect was a bad idea, about, hey, we think we've spotted the iPad in the wild.
In retrospect, this was a bad idea.
It was, and so there was, after we published that blog post, and by the way, that kind of marketing was something we did all the time. Every week we published these blog posts about what we saw on our network. It was a content marketing, worked fantastically well. We were in the middle of our all hands meeting, and our head of marketing interrupts the all hands meeting, holding his phone at arm's length, saying, there's somebody on the phone. It's like, who is it? It's like, they say that they're Steve Jobs, and I'm pretty sure they are. And you could hear someone screaming through the phone in the the company wasn't that big. We were maybe 20 people in a conference room, and like the screaming is coming out of the phone, and you're like, okay. And so Steve was very angry that we pre-released or let everybody know the iPad was coming. He was very secretive. And not soon after that, he was at a conference, and somebody asked him about Flurry. And there's a video. If you search for Steve Jobs Flurry, he's on stage ranting about how we're a horrible company and doing this and doing. So I like to say that Steve Jobs knew who I was. He just didn't like me at all. And so I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. We ended up patching it over and became partners with Apple, but there was a few months there where it was an existential risk.
And best friends with Steve Jobs?
No, I more like I don't think Steve ever liked us very much, but they ended up living with us. But man, there was a few months there where I was like, oh my God, Steve Jobs is going to kill our company. Like, we were doing so well, and now we're going to get demolished. But it was just,
one man's whim can decide your future.
Oh my gosh. Well, Steve Jobs Flurry YouTube is going in the episode notes. We're tracking that one down.
It was intense. So here's my 30-second second story, because I've told that one a few times. When the Edward Snowden leaks came out, everybody was going through it. It was all this information about the NSA and the CIA and what they did. And this was after we had sold Flurry years later. And somebody was like, hey, did you know Flurry was in the Snowden leaks? I was like, in the Snowden leaks? We didn't do anything with intelligence. Like, what are you talking about? Why would we be there? And so if you go into the Snowden leak documents, you will find that there is a presentation about something called Project Badass. And Project Badass was a project the NSA launched to reverse engineer the Flurry analytics protocol to use it to track people on their phones wherever they went. Because Flurry was so ubiquitous.
This is how your dad became James Bond.
Oh man. And so it was like, we were in all these apps and all these phones, and they were like, we could bug all these phones, or if we could somehow reverse engineer the Flurry protocol, we can track these people without them knowing. But the best part about the presentation was, I was reading this presentation, I was like, oh no, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I have always been a paranoid person. That isn't just something I do on the podcast. And so from the very beginning, I'm like, we have to encrypt, we have to encrypt, we have to encrypt. But the only platform we could not encrypt was the BlackBerries. This is back when BlackBerries existed. And so the Flurry SDK on the BlackBerry was the only one that was unencrypted in terms of the network traffic. And it turns out the only one they successfully broke was BlackBerry.
Oh my gosh.
Everything else, like the conclusion of the presentation was they were unsuccessful in cracking all the others. I was like, yes, thank God, my paranoia came through. And so
did they mention how the 4 BlackBerry users felt about having their encryption broken?
Oh man, but I was literally jumping up and down when I got to that slide. I was like, yes, I'm not just paranoid, I'm right. Oh, that was intense. Yes.
I'm impressed that they were going to use you for a global control network. I guess
that's something else.
I guess you built a big company, bud. Nice.
Yeah. Let me tell you, there's some things that life does not prepare you for, and that was one of them. Okay, Nick, give us a crazy story.
All right, let's do this thing here. So one policy that I think is just critical for founders to apply is to find ways to increase your surface area for serendipity. So basically find ways to get lucky. When I was starting my first company, this was back in 2012, 2013, we were building a mobile wallet. all the feedback we got from mentors, fellow founders, and investors was good team, but boring idea. I still contest that a little bit, but always open to some good feedback. Fast forward to the summer of 2013. One of my mentors wanted to go to the Bitcoin conference. This was the first ever Bitcoin conference. He knew that I loved the BD side of conferences and was just very social. And so he asked me to come. Tickets were really expensive too. And I was on the ramen profitability side of my finances. And so he offered to pay for the ticket for me as well. And I said, no, I trust you. I'll pay for my ticket. Let's go there and have some fun. Conference was amazing. They also had a Bitcoin hackathon there, the first of its kind. And so one of my buddies and I, my co-founder at the time, went through the Bitcoin hackathon and ultimately won the hackathon. It was obviously a pivot from our mobile wallet concept. But within 24 hours, we had found a problem that was interesting, built the prototype, won the hackathon, had investor interest, and ultimately our first customers for this concept. And so it was just a great moment to lean into serendipity and, just make sure that you keep finding great ways to open up new pathways forward.
That's insane. Isn't that always how it works? In 24 hours, you go from idea to product to customers and investment. That's how it works, right?
There it is.
Now, if you're vibe coding, yeah.
That's so true. I guess people hearing this are going to say, wait, isn't that just how it works?
Oh, right. AI makes everything possible.
Just tell the app that you want it to build and it'll just spit it right out. No problem.
So true.
Oh, man, that is nuts, Nick. I guess if startups are so hard, at some point it has to get easy. And that's your easy. That was payback that you get for all those hard days, right?
Yeah, it was a moment where timing aligned well, that's for sure.
Okay, well, let's wrap up this trip down memory lane with quick, if you guys had to give yourself advice back before you became a founder, knowing everything you know now, what would it be? My advice to myself would be focus on problems, not solutions. I wasted far too many years of my life trying to make a solution work when it wouldn't work. And the problems that we selected were always good, and that was fortunate. But if I'd focused on the problem, I could have saved myself years and years of time. What else you got, Nick? What do you think? What would you tell younger Nick?
Yeah, that's golden. I think without a doubt, find the smartest people you know and learn from them. Specifically, figure out what are things that they find interesting. So what are new aspects of the world that they're learning about? And figure out what are problems that they find interesting. If you can do that consistently, you will make sure you're on the frontiers of new opportunities. And to Sean's point, you will ground yourself in a world of perspective problems.
It's funny because my advice to younger Nick was don't start companies, just buy more Bitcoin and hold on to it and don't sell it. Just hold on to it.
Oh my gosh, so true. That's a good point. Yeah, we'll have to, maybe I'll revise my advice there.
My biggest numeric win is buying Bitcoin in 2013.
That is too
it's
good.
Just so hard. It's just a gut punch every time you think of yourself as an investor. Mine is don't build two products. Focus. So when I was back as the CEO at SendHub, we had a great messaging product, but I wanted something that I liked using. So I basically forced the team to add voice. And so we had two features, two products, and that was a huge mistake. Really cost us.
Oh, man. It is weird to think back to the beginning of these journeys, but you shared it with all of you out there. You can tell that there's more, there's experience, there's scars, there's victories behind all that advice we deal out here in the podcast. And first off, I have a lot of gratitude to Ash and Nick. 50 episodes is no joke. We've done great. It's fun with you. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you both. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
And we're going to keep going. It's now time to start on the next 50 episode. And
let's do this.
You can add.
I'm so excited. I can barely contain it.
So ask us questions so we can have another 50 episodes. Head over to thestartuphelpdesk.com or find us on X/Twitter as thestartuphd so we can do this a lot more. We love it. We'd love to share more with you. And I look forward to episode 100 where we can look back on all the lessons we learned as podcasters over the years.
And our 75 years on this earth.
Count me into that.
As always, Ash and Nick, thank you for sharing your stories and the journey with all of us.
Thank you both. Absolute
Thanks,
blast.
guys. 50 episodes. Woo!
Yeah.
Okay, so for now, the Startup Help Desk is closed. We will be back. For now, good luck in building your business.